For the past 10 months, David Daines and his partner have been growing carnations and roses on their property near Farley without soil. In other words, hydroponically. It's a technique which was first used by the ancient Egyptians and nowadays can be used to grow a variety of crops. This particular hydroponic system is one of many which can be used. Fertiliser containing the major and trace elements is mixed with water and fed to the plant through a drip irrigation system. The plant stands in a medium of specially treated insulation wool and the excess water is allowed to drain away, so eliminating disease. During summer, the plants require at least 4 minutes of watering 4 times a day. After the flowers are harvested, they're treated with preservative to help them last a few extra days. Similar hydroponic farms are already established at Frankston and in Melbourne.
What's the advantages of growing something hydroponic?
Number of advantages. I think the first one is that you've got control of your growing conditions. So therefore you're going to get a much better quality product. And I think that's the most important thing. The other thing is that you get no problems with weeds, or very few problems with weeds. You get very quick uptake of fertilisers. You don't get the problems that you do with growing things in the soil. And you're sort of going to get a much bigger yields from the type of crops that you're going to be growing. They're the main things.
Is it something that, say, other farmers could get involved with? Is it an alternative for them?
Oh yes, of course it is. But you've got to remember that it's an intensive type of production, and not everybody's interested in growing things in this intensive sort of a way. The other thing is that some people would argue that it might be a high capital input, but it isn't really when you compare other types of farming practices where you've got lots of machinery, which we don't have here.
David, are there some crops that you could grow better hydroponically than, say, grown traditionally now?
Oh yes, of course. And of course the other question is too that there are some crops that you can't grow the way we are here, and that is under plastic. Things like lettuce, we're having great difficulty in growing lettuce here. We haven't got the varieties that they have overseas. But the crops that we're growing here grow quite satisfactorily under plastic.
Can you see it taking off, say, in the next couple of years? Can it be a growth industry? Can more people get involved with it?
Yes, I certainly do, and particularly close to high population areas where they want a fresh product and they want a quality product and they want it quick. This is where this sort of system will be very, very acceptable.
With what you're growing here, your flowers, roses and carnations, you're finding an easy market for them?
Yes, very, no trouble at all. I would say that something like at least 90% of all the flowers that come into the Hunter Valley and into Newcastle come from outside, so that there's a great potential for growing flowers.
Colleen and Cliff Hawkins have been breeding dairy goats on their property at Gilliston Heights for nearly 20 years. 40 breeders are now registered in the Hunter Valley, producing the 4 main breeds, the brown and white Toggenburg, the white Zarnans, the distinctive Anglo-Nubians and British Alpines. But as a growing industry, there's doubt about its future. Uncertainty surrounds the quality control of its product. For instance, there's a continuing debate on whether goat's milk, long recognised as having special medicinal properties, should be pasteurised or left a raw product.
If it's a raw product and it's produced properly, it's far better than a pasteurised product because you get better calcium absorption, you get your vitamin C and you get all your vitamins in it. When you pasteurise it, you're breaking it down.
But despite these immediate problems, the dairy goat industry will be on show this weekend at Cessnock, and the judges will be faced with a high standard of entry in all classes.
What's the sort of standard now of the breeds in the Hunter Valley?
The quality standards, they have improved since we first started, because most people just had the saying, you just make your dough with the old bully down the road. And well, now they've found out that there's such a thing as a bully down the road and there's such a thing as a stud buck. And if they can go and use a stud buck, well, they're on a better deal, because they're getting something of more quality.
And is it a viable business? Is it expensive?
Breeding them, well, we let our bucks out, like for unregistered people, it's $15. on an average service, up to about $60 on a top stud service. You can get artificial insemination, but it's not a real good idea because a lot of people aren't quite sure if their does are on season or they're going off season and this sort of thing.
Now the milk itself, it's got special qualities, hasn't it?
Well, it's more easily digestible than what cow's milk is. It's digested very much the same as breast milk, about 20 minutes. And it's very white because the goats don't put carotene in their milk, which is the yellow of the cow's milk.
And what sort of things will the judges be looking at in this particular doe on Sunday?
Well, in a Toggenburg, for instance, you're looking at good bone structure. It has to be reasonably heavy bone structure, not flimsy. You're looking at good pasterns, which is good feet, which they're capable of walking around on to get their food. Nice temperament of a head, nice shoulders, good straight back line, good rump, and naturally a good udder. Now this doe here's got a nice udder. She's got good sized teats, not long and droopy. And she's got a well attached udder at the back and the front, the same as they judge a dairy cow on. A dairy cow judge could judge a goat on udder, but he'd have to brush up on his other body points.
This is the Grim Reaper, the star in the federal government's controversial campaign against AIDS. He is supposed to represent the AIDS virus and is seen in advertisements all over Australia, knocking people down from all walks of life. But it's the bowling alley metaphor which some people believe is sullying the sport's image, while others believe it's too abstract and goes over young people's heads. Perhaps the advertisements are a bit abstract, as this would explain reports that bowling alleys around Australia have been plagued by people wanting to know if they can get AIDS from going bowling. In Newcastle, the reaction to the advertisements among female bowlers taking part in competition at the Mayfield Bowl was mixed.
But I was a bit disappointed. I thought it put a slant on the game.
Do you think it does? Do you think there's a bit of a stigma with bowling now, or?
Yes, I do.
I've heard that some people have rung up and asked whether you can get AIDS from bowling.
It didn't give me that impression that you could get it. I just thought it was a shame they picked that game I should have left sports out of it altogether.
I actually didn't think it was strong enough, and I didn't think it would get through to the younger children. I sort of thought it might have been a bit over their head or something.
You think of people as those pins, and you think of the AIDS virus as that bowling ball. And to me, I don't think it's hard enough.
So it didn't worry you, quite the contrary?
No, it could have been harder if they wanted to make it harder.
But an image of AIDS is not good for business. Today, bowling alley managers had nothing to say as they hoped desperately that the whole issue would just die away.
Portuguese-born Julio Santos has been blowing glass since he was 12. In 1968 he moved to Australia, settling in Newcastle where he worked for Philips. In 1979 he established a studio at Tomago, from which he works at the present time. The Maitland Gallery has on display 63 of the master craftsman's works. Although many of Santos's pieces are in the form of functional objects, most would think twice about using them for everyday use. This plate is believed to be as perfect as the eye can make it. It's cost $5,000. Complementing the glassworks is a varied collection of examples from 150 local artists and artisans, including ceramics, sculpture, painting and doll making. Organisers are hoping for large crowds to view the display during the Steamfest weekend. 40,000 visitors are expected to flock to Maitland for the festival. This busy street will be closed to traffic and lined entirely with stalls. The gallery too is getting into the action, with a number of local artists creating their works on the grounds during the weekend.
The rally began with hundreds praying for peace in Pacific Park. The Palm Sunday message on nuclear-free zones was given by the Lord Mayor of Newcastle, John McNaughton, who then led the parade down Hunter Street through the mall to Civic Park. It seems that times are changing for anti-nuke protesters. World leaders are now talking of nuclear disarmament rather than arms control. A small step, but one that the peace movement believes is a positive sign of hope. Converging in Civic Park, the marchers were joined by hundreds of people who came to hear of new moves which might break the nuclear chain. National President of Scientists Against Nuclear Arms, Dr. John Hunter, has just returned from an international anti-nuke conference in Moscow.
The way to ensure our security is simply to build down. And that's the sort of attitude that's coming out of the Soviet Union now. The new way of thinking, as they call it, carries with it that notion of disarmament, drastic disarmament, and also mutually assured security.
A collection of huge banners designed by unemployed peace supporters displayed some of the ideas that might result from a nuclear-free world. And earlier this morning, wars of the past were not forgotten, as the Rats of Tobruk marched in memory of the 600 Australian soldiers that did not return. 46 years ago, the longest siege in the history of British Australian Armed Forces began. And today, veterans from the Newcastle branch of the Rats remembered.
Second row position, you hear a bunch of more go up, and we go on.
Wilkins, well-known coach and former representative player, is again assisting school coach John Arthur with the team's preparation. Former Australian Schoolboy international, top-flight player and district coach Robert Finch was also there to lend a hand. Johnny Arthur is confident about Wednesday's pipeline.
It starts off with about 170 sides from Queensland and New South Wales, open both to private and state high schools.
Down to the last 32, that in itself is an achievement.
Oh, very pleased with that, very pleased with it.
How have you gone?
We've won both games. We had a fourth in the first round, won second and third round games against Gosford and Francis Greenway. We scored 30 points in both those matches. Attack's by far our strongest point.
And you're going to pull a crowd on Wednesday night, aren't you?
We certainly will.
There's a lot of people going to be there.
Yeah, even if we get most of our school there, that's about 500 to 800 students to watch.
John, you've been around football a long while. What is the standard of schoolboy football developing into these days? It was a bit flat a few years back.
Very high, especially this type of competition really promotes a high level of competitiveness in our side, and we would have 6 or 7 current representative or former representative players, and we're by no means guaranteed to get the last 16 of the competition.
Years ago, the university finished a study which showed that the incidence of heart disease at Cessnock was extraordinarily high, in fact the worst in Australia. During the past 12 months, researchers have carried out the groundwork for a study which could work out why heart disease is so prevalent. But funding for that study has been knocked back by the state government. Having devised the program, you must be very disappointed that funding isn't coming through.
Yes, very disappointed and upset. I think it's an innovative program that stands to have a real impact on heart disease patterns in an area which has one of the highest rates of the whole of Australia.
Researchers say the risk factors such as high blood pressure and high cholesterol levels exist at Cessnock. There is also a high incidence of people who smoke. All the more reason, they believe, why the second study should go ahead.
We think that this is a low-cost project which had the support of local people, growing support of local people, and we're very disappointed that a low-cost thing like this does not get the priority that it deserves.
How serious is the heart disease problem?
Brian Carlson played his early football with North Newcastle before heading south to join North Sydney and ultimately win Australian selection. In a remarkable career, he played 17 test matches, including this one against the visiting New Zealanders in 1959. On that occasion, Brian, wearing the number 1 jersey, helped the Kangaroos to a 9-8 win, thanks mainly to his reliable kicking. Brian Carlson became a very well-respected member of the North Sydney club, and a tribute will be made to his memory at tonight's National Panasonic Cup quarter-final match at the ISC between the Bears and Parramatta. Today, many members of the rugby league community, including Newcastle League Chief Max Fox, paid homage to the footballing skills of a legendary player.
Well, he was a complete footballer. He had a great sense of positional play. He saw openings early, could defend well because he was always in position. He had perfect hands, could kick a football as well as any Aussie rules player, and was just a superb, complete footballer.
He was a great all-round footballer. Probably, I've never saw one better than him, and all his teammates and that say that. And he ranks with the best of them.
And what was he like to play with?
Well, he was an interesting fella. I can remember the Leeds test in '59 when we should have won that test. We got beaten by the odd point. I can't remember the score now. But he took an intercept, or got the ball about 70 yards out and made a lot of ground up the sideline. And I was coming up to take an in-pass from him, and he dummied me and went on his own and took the tackle. And I said to him, "You greedy bludger, why don't you give me the ball?" And he just laughed and carried on. You know, that was the way he was. He loved his football.
At Raymond Terrace this morning, a lucky escape for the driver of a semi-trailer, which overturned while negotiating a corner near the ambulance station. Police say the driver escaped with only cuts and abrasions. Fortunately for home-going holidaymakers, the heavy vehicle fell onto the side of the Pacific Highway and didn't interfere with traffic.
In the Hunter region, more than 2,500 motorists were stopped for random breath testing or traffic offences over the Easter break. With the State Highway Patrol cars in full force, stationed radar units ensured slower and steadier travelling for holidaymakers on their return trips. The usual bottleneck traffic delays at Swansea and Hexham eased up this year, allowing most of the traffic to flow smoothly. But at Raymond Terrace yesterday, vehicles were slowed down when a semi-trailer overturned, spilling its $100,000 load of welding equipment onto the footpath. The Kerry Bay driver suffered only minor injuries and was taken to the Mater Hospital. Kim Pride from Warners Bay is a new mum after just giving birth to her fourth son. She's also part of the Mater Hospital's early discharge program. Every day, Kim is visited by a trained midwife to help out during the recovery period in the comfort of her own home. Many other new mothers like Kim are now choosing to leave hospitals earlier than usual after childbirth. The early discharge program is operating from the western suburbs, the Belmont and the Mater hospitals. According to the Mater's Assistant Director of Nursing, Anne Saxton, the program is already proving successful.
We're surprised by the participation so far. It has been much more than we expected. Westmead in Sydney have been providing an early discharge program for some time, and it was very slow to get moving down there, but ours is being very popular so far.
District Park was the end of a long ordeal for 28-year-old trail bike rider Stephen Drew of West Pymble. He had finally been lifted to safety. His ordeal began at about 1:30 p.m. on Monday when he was out riding his trail bike through rugged country between Rylstone and the township of Putty. While negotiating a steep embankment on Mount Werribee, he ran into trouble.
Just was trying to negotiate through some a rocky area, and I was just sort of like knocked off balance and hit a tree. Fell off and got my leg up under the bike.
And you were out all night, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Did your friends stay with you, or were you by yourself?
2 of them stayed, and the other 4 went for help.
Right, and it's taken what? How long has it taken you all day to get back? Is that right?
Yeah, it was 21 hours after I did it when they found us.
Yesterday, the Westpac Rescue Helicopter Service was unable to locate the stranded party in the failing light. A search began again this morning, and Stephen's group managed to capture the attention of the helicopter by igniting a sleeping bag. Eventually, ground rescue personnel walked in and carried Stephen out by stretcher to the Mount Gosper Army airstrip, where the Westpac helicopter was waiting for him.
The President of the Chamber, Laurie Molyneux, says the persistent rumours that a decision has already been made in Adelaide's favour is disturbing. Mr Molyneux said such a decision would have to be politically motivated.
We believe that we have the complete infrastructure here, the skills, technology, equipment, and certainly most of the subcontracting firms that would be involved. In any case, both the contenders for the contract have said that those contractors are on the east coast, so that living here, of course, is going to be much easier working here. The main thing we're very concerned with is that the decision should be made on the grounds of economic realities rather than political expediency. We believe that it's of such national importance that vote catching and other pork barrelling should be below the importance to the nation of this decision.